Ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving really into outer space, into the cellular realm. Um, so the next presentation I'm super excited about because it really is going to take us to a different level at the molecular cellular level, but like talking about transdisciplinary, I think it's going to be an interesting challenge for Ottavio to bridge, like from these very kind of culturally, socially, like person-infused interpretations coming down all the way to neurochemical processes. And so it's actually really exciting to have you here. Ottavio is an associate professor of molecular medicine at the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Sao Paulo in the Department of Internal Medicine. So just, like thinking about the types of presentations that we have had so far already. He is also a researcher at IDOR, and his work focuses or involves an integrative, systematic analysis of neuroimmunological networks to understand the immune response and new molecular mechanisms in depression, infections, autoimmune diseases, and cancer. Previously, he held positions of visiting full professor in the Department of Pharmacy at the Health Sciences Center of the Federal University of Rio Grande do Norte. And he's also currently a full advisor in the Department of Internal Medicine, Immunology, and the Faculty of Pharmaceutical Sciences. It's a lot of big words. And so I'm really excited to have this perspective, and I can't wait to actually learn with you about the stuff that you're going to talk about now. Ottavio.
So thank you very much, Ronald, for this wonderful introduction. I feel very important when he speaks. So it's a pleasure to be here and to participate in this great meeting. Congratulations to all the organizers. I would like to thank everyone, Tiago, Everton, Ronald, and Gito, Rosane, for the opportunity to be here. And I'm really excited, and for me it's really a challenge. I was yesterday giving a talk in a bioinformatics congress, and then I always feel like at home. But today, through this spiritual point of view, I was feeling, so this is a challenge for me, but I was also happy because I remember when I started to do research, I investigated a single molecule called CD40 ligand, and then I told you this yesterday also in the meeting, and then only me and my supervisor were excited about our findings. Because nobody else was working with CD40 ligand deficiency. But nowadays I see, okay, what I'm doing has transdisciplinary, not only me, but my team that are all there up looking to this talk. And then there is a great associations with mind and body. And I would like to start. Normally people acknowledge at the end, but I like so much to acknowledge in the beginning because the students, the PhD students, master and postdocs of the lab, they are responsible. They are all there. Please stand here. Look. Oh. Great. All the credits of these presentations goes to them. I'm just here, the voice is speaking, and supervising the work, of course, but they are great researchers and working there in USP and IDOR here with us. I also would like to thank all the sponsors of this work we are developing. And I would like to starting after this wonderful music and food and photos, to ask you how many numbers we have here, please? No. This destroyed my joke, huh? My interactions. I hope somebody would say 4, 9. Nobody? Everyone is. So I. Huh? Oh, thank you so much. So now I'm feeling very comfortable because I see everybody here systemic and they think systemically. So that's what we do in the lab. We try to see hidden connections and try to find uncharacterized networks and pathways to try to understand how the body works systemically and integratively through different body systems. But now I see that our results developed in the lab by these great guys there behind, they bring us to the opportunity to try to understand a little bit more about mind and body associations. So in this great paper, the authors encourage us to move forward and to try to understand more these connections, because this brings us to from a pharmacological era to a non-pharmacological ways to treat people through the mind. And this is essential. Essential because when we think about mind and body associations, nowadays there are several pathways characterizing particularly the neuroimmunological axis, where different immunological organs and nervous system organs like brain, blood, spleen, bone marrow, they are totally interconnected through several networks, from cellular to molecules, through cytokines, through neurotransmitters, which are produced by both, not only by neurons, but also by immune cells. Both of them produce cytokines and also neurotransmitters, and these have been characterized, and these networks are spread throughout our body. This gives the basis to explain through molecular pathways how placebo effects also occurs in our body. So nowadays, when we think what's making us to have systemic interactions or transcriptomic changes or proteomics changes through placebo, it's not the water or the pulver that's there, but the power of our mind. So the mind has a strong power in our body. For instance, let's see if this is true. Who here, please raise your hands, who was stressed and had back pain? Great. Not great the pain, of course, but great that I see the evidence. Oh, headache. Oh, a lot of people. So, and stomach pain. This is a lot when you get nervous. So the same when we get excited. Before the talks there, we feel, the bellies have butterflies or fly. So the emotions are present. I'm sure Rosiane was, where is she? She's not here. She was so excited, organized this meeting. I was yesterday trying to talk to her. She said, I'm running here, trying to organize the talk. And she was very excited and doing her best to make this meeting so essential. So meditation, the same. When I think about, I remember in the neuro meeting in Búzios, George made a great meditation. I was so happy to feel that changes occurs in our body. After meditation, after contemplation, or when we go to nature, after 120 minutes of contact even with nature, we've started to have changes in our body. And these changes are really clearly observable by these omics approaches. And then you can see here, just to show some evidences, there are networks that are assessed through our mind in our body. And this makes real changes in our body. And then, but we can see also in under stressed, as you all raised your hands here, except some people who are very spiritualized, who did not roast the hands. But during pandemics, we all had a lot of stress, afraid of dying from COVID-19, or afraid of our parents, of our kids, or somebody, our friends, to die. But this increased a lot, depression, for instance, anxiety, and other problems, mental associated disorders. And then science tried to characterize this and try to give you explanations through monoamine hypothesis or through inflammatory hypotheses, genetic associations, structural, functional brain changes. But actually, alone, none of them are able to explain how our body are disturbed under stress, or how our body are controlled or are come back to homeostasis when we have meditation or when we have pleasure through spiritual, through this wonderful music that Fabio was doing outside. I'm not seeing here, but this have a huge impact. And how we see this through network medicine. That's a field. The seminal paper from 2007 in New England Journal showed that our social networks, our diseases networks that we have, for instance, if we have obesity, we are more prone to have more susceptibility to specific infections, but also several other layers. I would like to invite, after the great researchers who presented here, from Alexander to all the others here, these presentations, I forgot the name, I'm sorry. But that we have to do a review, including Everton, including new layers here, showing that also spiritual layers is also influencing our minds through what we have in see here. I was so excited to see that Alexander showed that the paper is also almost published through the genetic causes of mediumships. I think soon we have to expand these layers and see that spirituality is also involved. Science is changing the sense. It's not from nowadays. A paradigm to change sometimes demands decades. I remember this book my father was reading in the living room of when I was 15 years old, or 20, I forgot because it's a long time ago. But I was so excited. Father, what is this? He was telling, no, son, science is changed. Now we are having a paradigmatic changes in systemic holism, and spirituality is starting to have place in science. And today, I will, after here, I try to call him and my mother to tell them that now I'm in a meeting with great researchers showing that this change is highly occurring at the moment. And Fritjof Capra showed through several books this also some decades ago. And these books inspired me to develop the lab we are doing now. We are working now to see that systemic view help us to understand life in a more dynamic and integrative way. So how we do this? Nowadays we have thousands of data. I promise you I will be not only in the molecular side. The second part of my talk at the end, I will show some data on near-death experience that we also use this approach. So we will move now from a bottom-up approach. I'm so excited to see the top-down approach the other speakers are developing here, from the spirituality to our body. And here we are doing the other way round, come from the bottom to the top to see and use proteomic, transcriptomic data in an era where zettabyte informations are available through this open science that we have nowadays. And we try to fish important information. As Alexander was seeing some genes in mediumship, I'm so excited that this kind of works moving forward that we will be able to try to find some more associations between genes and also spirituality in a more causality fashion. So, but what we try to do is to fish these informations in a really hard way. What we do, we assess the databases, we go through all the type of data when they are available also in GO, in proteomics exchanges, and we try to do macro analysis to connect these data sets through bioinformatics. And then what we see, specifically what we do in a workflow, we get this data, we try to do differently expression analysis to find genes and proteins that are dysregulated or regulated in a specific way. We try to see intersections between these proteins, and then we move to try to find information, gene ontology, through immunological signature, stratification, ranking, and reach the specific interactomes to move to the laboratory and try to see causality through this approach. We use this in a moment. I'm remembering now the time when I did my postdoc in Germany. My supervisor, she was a rheumatologist. And then in rheumatology, there was a strong paradigm that Paul Ehrlich, approximately 100 years ago, told that autoantibodies were part of a pathological conditions. And then I saw the data, this is not possible, because there is nothing in the evolution that remains when it's only pathological. And now I remember these parts when we saw that males, females, below and above 65 years, they present clusters of interconnected autoantibodies, but rheumatological disease breakdowns, as you can see there, these patterns. So systemic sclerosis, for instance. So the same here, when I saw for the first time the great works developed by Ronald Everton in the meetings, and I saw that there is a spiritual possibilities of interaction. They are appearing somewhere, and several materialistic researchers are associated these informations to pathological. The same insight came to my mind. It's impossible. There is nothing that the evolution leaves for us. The evolution is highly intelligent to leave some pathological conditions just for fun, but no, everything comes from this regulation of a normal process, what we see in a pathological field. And then we went to try to use this approach, and select several data sets, and she found through approximately 3,000 individuals that the blood of patients with depression, major depressive disorder specifically, so they present in the blood a correspondence with the brain. And then I didn't show the data here for the brain because it's pretty obvious for neurologists, and there are several psychiatric important professors here, as Romero Valada there, that inspired our research when I started to work with MDDs. And then we see, but in the blood, we see that there are upregulated genes and downregulated genes when our mind starts to get depressed. This is a strong indications, as you can see here, as I saw in the rheumatology field, that this is a topological correlogram where we can see neuroimmunological pathways interconnected, and Annie is doing this work, and she's finding that neuroimmunological pathways are semantically interconnected, but also she found that these networks are highly related to synaptic pathways. She did a single analysis. This is a bioinformatic programming approach, is similar to gene ontology, to see what these genes are doing there in the blood, and to our surprise, several genes in our body associate with synapses. So what they are doing there, what our blood has, that we have a sea of molecules interconnected to upregulated and downregulated genes involved with synapses in our blood. That's really, for me, exciting, interesting. And first of all, before going to some mechanistic ideas, so she linked to linear discriminant analysis, which are these genes important, and she saw that some genes really stratify patients with MDD from controls, but very interesting also she saw that patients with COVID-19 also with depression and without depressions, also the genes are involved in stratifying patients. So regardless we have pure MDD, or if the depression is associated with the infection conditions, we have genes that forms interaction network also through dysosome, which is an analysis of gene and disease associations, that these genes are connected through different pathways. She found not only genes associated with depression, but the genes associated with psychosis, with cognitive endometriosis, epilepsies, and several ideas started to come to my mind that we have to move forward to study also how these genes are affected by non-ordinary experiences. And then we didn't reach this point, but I will show some things. And then Haroldo Dutra Dias, who is doing his PhD in Minas Gerais, and then he's worked with us with the bioinformatics, interact with our group, collaborating, and then he used the approach and he asked from these genes, which are those important for connecting genomic and transcriptomics. I promise I will be soon moving to NDEs. I don't know if you are nervous, but I'm nervous to start to go into much deep to the body, but I will come soon to the spiritual side. But let's go. We see here that the leukocytes, they have genes which are classically associated to the brain. So when we think mind is in the brain, I see several researchers telling that there is a specific point of the mind where that controls, or the mind is localized, and our data shows not. Our mind is connected, molecule with molecule, in different parts of our body through intrinsic neuroimmunological regulations that are affected by our emotions. You can see several genes. I will not go through the specific function of these genes because it's not the context here, but the idea is that our mind, what's happening in our body. We have interconnected molecules that are affected under these conditions, and they, for instance, you can see there PAX6, a gene, is here under control with controls. This gene has not so much connections, but then starts to build bridges with other genes. They started to do, this is a Spearman correlation analysis, and some genes also started to lose connections, as you can see, SORSK3. So our mind makes some relationships remain the same, fixed, né? But others start to be built, others start to be destroyed, these connections. And then these genes, to give an order for these ideas, these genes started to stratify the patients. You can see this principal component analysis with spectral decompositions, with merging mathematics with physics vectorial analysis, that we see that some genes started to work to stratify the patients. And given an order there, through this relative effector analysis, which uses MANOVA statistical approach, that some genes are highly important. And again, the genes which lose connections and those with made new connections, these genes, they increases highly the probability, statistically, the probability of developing depressions. When doing corrections through false discovery rate analysis, we see that some of the genes remain statistically significant, while other not. I didn't show these 4 genes. Among all the others, important is stratifying the MDD with health controls. We see here that they also are connected with depressive moods, but mental depression, and several others, Alzheimer, and body mass index, showing that in different contexts of our life, we change our networks, and some of these genes are highly important for this process. And then we asked, particularly for PAX, which presented the higher association with different disorders, we asked if under depression, then Rafael did this experiment. My lab has no centrifuge, thank you for the time. My lab has no centrifuge, only computers. And then sometimes some students came there and they, oh, professor, I want to do experiments. Here, it's impossible. So, but some members doing this, they are doing fantastic works in collaborations, and they are helping us a lot. I'm very thankful to them. And they showed, under stress, Ian made this analysis, they did the experiments, and then the mice was restrained under his strained stress for 6 hours a day during 7 days, and the PBMCs were isolated in PAX6 expressions, together with several other lineage markers like CD3, CD4, important for lymphocytes, monocytes, neutrophils. They were evaluated, and we saw clearly that PAX6, as you can see here in this cluster 4, that PAX6 started under stress. The genes, even in mice, not only in humans, they are conservatively associated with the development of stress. This is a gene, is a transcription factor, essential for brain development. I saw some researchers from IDOR in Rio de Janeiro staying PAX for neurogenesis, and we see, but what these genes is doing in the blood of patients, it's also something we are now moving forward. We asked the grant to welcome propose in England. We hope FAPESP also will support the eyes, and maybe also Gito will get very excited to support this research, right? But I hope so. Also, the IDOR is also excited with this this work. And then you can see that for our curiosity, we saw that we went to see which other parts of the brain it's also these genes are dysregulated. And then she found several of the genetically associated genes with depression. PAX was also there in the brain, but specifically in the amygdala, where it is essential for mood, in the limbic system. And then we see that there is a strong correspondence between brain and body. The time people here, very organized, told me I should move forward, and then we see that this association is not only related to depression, specifically, but when we see that somebody with a specific infection, or during accidents, near-death experiences, we see that several conditions, several infections are also associated with depression, even cancer. The way you receive, how spirituality influences the way you feel or you deal with specific diseases, we see that patients are more susceptible to depression. And then what Adriel found in hepatitis, that also there is a neuroimmunological networks, not only in the PBMCs, this is also present, but massively also present in liver. So several organs of our body, there are networks, neuroimmunological networks, susceptible to our feelings, to our emotions, to our thoughts. And that's really important, because this is Adriel. People say that he looks like me, and then some friends say you have to do DNA, but I was never in his city, so it's impossible, Adriel. But look, and then he got different stages of the diseases. And what's happening? When the diseases worsens, the neuroimmunological associated genes started to be downregulated. That's really exciting, because we have to rethink how we deal with diseases, how we put in the clinical settings, in therapeutic settings, the importance of mind, of affection, of generosity, of love, of understanding life through a different way. And this meet is essential, bring spirituality to this field. And you can see here that these genes here that Adriel found, they are associated with major depressive disorder, but mental, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, and different diseases are associated with these genes. And this network, Johan there I also found these networks in HPV infections, HLTV infections. Fernando Yuri found these neuroimmunological networks. And Igor and Deborah, who are working here in IDOR with Rodrigo, they are trying to see which parts of the tumors are more dysregulated in regard to these parts. And to conclude this first part and move to NDEs, so we see why, Otávio, we have these neuroimmunological molecules inside of our body. I would expect it that they are present only in the brain, in the nervous systems, but inside leukocytes. And then I saw this fantastic review, recent review, that you can see here that there are neuronal communication, immune-neuronal, but immune and immune synapses that we learn in immunology, they exchange not only cytokines, but also neurotransmitters. So should we have then inside of leukocytes the presence of synapse-related? And then you can see here, again, this paper was still not published, but my belly is, and my hands are itching to put the spiritual side here, that we have, besides social networks, exposome, also neuroimmunome, and we have, interestingly here, affectome, affections, our feelings. If I'm angry, or if I'm in love, our brain changes, but our whole body changes, and we have changes circulating in our body, providing the systemic view. You can see here, I was so excited in reading this paper, and because it gives a foundation to understand the connections between emotions and molecules in our body. And then, now, I go finally to near-death experiences. But before diving in near-death experiences, our data is in line also with some mathematical changes. There is a mathematician here? No? So I can tell what I want. No problem. Nobody. No problem. No worries. No worries. Please, nobody ask ChatGPT if it's correct what I'm saying here. But look, we all remember at school, people were teaching us squares, circles, triangles. But life is not like this. To build these big apartments or streets or cars, we need geometrical forms, well defined by Euclidean geometry. But when we move to the body, to nature, to trees, to clouds, to the spiritual world, we need to understand that life needs paradigmatic changes. Mathematics, they have done this. Physics, they are doing this. And I'm so glad that also physicians are doing this in medicine. And then you say here that the forms that organize life, so how life is organized, is non-linear. And then you can see, I was in my lab, so excited, when I discovered this meeting here, I was wanting to come here, said, guys, we have to move. And I found some of the students got so excited with me to study. Ian, Rosiane, we are there na turma do fundão, we call, né? But they are good students. And then you see a good professional. And then I was seeing nature, this encouragement. I think, Camila, where are you? Camila, great neuroscientist from Unifesp, a great professor. I got to know her 10 years ago, approximately. And then she shared with me this information and said, okay, so let's apply data science to study spirituality. We have to move through these directions to see if also we find important connections. This is essential for us. Let's move and not be afraid of this. It's nature telling this. If somebody comes to my lab and says, Otávio, you cannot study this, I say, okay, sorry. Please discuss with nature. So and all the scientists. But now I will say also, please discuss also with Alexander in Minas Gerais. O Everton, Ronald. And then there are several. I was so excited to see that there are parts of the brain that are under near-death experiences which are mapped to be associated with near-death experience, although a causality is not well defined, but also the science, the neurobiology starts to define. There are also changes in concentrations of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and also endogenous neurotransmitters released during this process. And they are doing a wonderful paper, you can see here. And then I was going, I will not define this because the previous speakers defined these spiritual connections so elegant. And then just to see in PubMed, I looked at this photo, I said, wow. So I said, look at this. Somebody is showing through that the spirits, when somebody die, not, of course, when die, of course, but when somebody sleeps or when somebody has a car accident or has under high stress or infections or coma, the mind, the conscious, dissociates from the body and starts to be several neurological phenomena. It starts to and continues to happen here in the brain. And then what I was searching for through these cell groups, and I was surprisingly find great journals accepting this out-of-body conscious association. The studies recognize the existence of this process. And then you see in two extremes of this three-dimensional PCA that normal consciousness, as we are here, I hope so that nobody is already under near-death experience sleep in my talk, né? Some, but I hope not all. And then you see here near-death experiences in the extreme of awareness, internal awareness, that somebody, the consciousness goes out of the body. And when we are in normal, we have other physiological aspects that we don't go deeply now. But as we talked, evolutionarily, I was searching for evolution should also describe this process. And I was so excited and so surprised to see that there are hypotheses also and data suggesting the existence of a phylogenetic association for near-death experiences. This brings a lot of hope for us. Yesterday, for instance, I was in the airplane, landed here in São Paulo, and then was in Congonhas. The airplane was almost landing, and suddenly the airplane started to go back to the air. I said, oh my God, what's happening here? And then the pilot said, no, a bird crashed on the airplane. I said, oh my God. And then I said, I was preparing my talks of near-death experience. I said, I hope I will be the body side to give the talk tomorrow, not the mind side only, through the mediumship with Everton. Eh? And then, as you can see here, Chico Xavier is not here anymore. I would need to search good mediums to communicate and give my talk here. But I was so happy to see that the evolutionary also is characterized near-death experiences. This comes from invertebrates until vertebrates. They are important and they have a function. As you can see here, in these conditions, animals to survive under strong stress. You can see this cheetah, he's trying to get the impala, and then when almost killing, and then the impala started to get death, thanatose, they call thanatose for the animals, and then the hyena came, the cheetah said, oh, I already died. So started to not fight anymore, and then the hyena, the cheetah saw the hyena, and then they started to fight, and then the highly intelligent near-death experience that saved the life of the impala. So so there are several evolutionary importance for these experiences. And then when we see, for instance, if somebody conscious of what's happening. For instance, with when it's open the chest or after a car accident, we would be unable to survive through this highly stress. And then the hypothesis is, so the soul, the spirits of the conscious, anyone can call as prefer, but they goes out of the body to survive, and then the body stay resting. And several people are starting to relating throughout the world. Then we are doing this paper. I would like to invite several of the researchers to help me to contribute with this systematic analysis we are doing. And then Rosiane and Ian are seeing in different parts of. Hugo also is doing this out with other parts of out-of-body experience, and are seeing that several countries, not only in Brazil, but different countries of the world are interested in this phenomenon, indicating that's not because we are very religious that we are interested in out-of-body experience or near-death experience. Actually, the research mostly come from different countries, much more in other countries than in Brazil. And then you see, although several research, as Alexander and several others here are doing wonderful works, you can see here that cell phone or spirit, what's this? Okay. Okay. And then you can see here the number of near-death experience articles are increasing dramatically throughout the last years. People are starting to get more interested to this research, and then you can see here that several original articles are investigating near-death experiences. And then Ian and Rosiane found keywords groups, and then you can see the phenomenology, of course, consciousness, spirituality, transcendence, and also mental health, mind-brain relationships, psychological phenomena, and so on. They are biological and a reality highly investigated nowadays, bring to all us hope that, as you can see here in order, the same as we show in the heat map, and then you can see here specifically, then they dissect from different parts, or spiritual transcendence experience, or mental and cognitive science. They start to dissect which are the words associated with this. And then I saw here hallucination, dissociation, emotional well-being, mental wellness. And actually, here is summarized. I go now fast because they are here telling me 5 minutes. I have to move forward. But as you can summarize here, into this figure that evolution, out-of-body experiences, neurological, drugs association, and spiritual experiences are across this phenomena of out-of-body experience through these near-death experiences. And what are the consequences of this? That's, for me, highly important. Normally, here, all of us, we lost somebody here, or an old grandma, or a child, or brother, father, mother, and we are, I'm sure, we live as death does not exist, but we all will be dying. I remember my sister, when my grandma was dying, close to die, she was so nervous in the living room, telling my grandma she was with 96 years old, 96. And my sister was nervous. She said, she will die. I said, 96 years, of course she'll die. We all will die. This is not and then we have to know what's happening after death. This is a great philosophical question that we scientists have to address. Look at here. People in this, The Lancet, a great journal, I'm sure it's our dreams, all scientists want to publish in The Lancet, is showing that people who had contact with spirituality, they changed their lives. They changed social attitudes to be more, to have more feelings for others, acceptance for others, they start to get more empathic, to be more lovely with each other. I say for the family, sometimes we don't say, I love you to each other, but it's so important in our relationships. And when somebody dies, we try to get the time that we didn't enjoy, but look at here. So religious attitudes increases also. And the fear of death reduces. If we know that after life, there is life also. We don't know why, how, but this meeting here, fantastic meeting, opens our hope that these near-death experiences are great examples that provide for us the most persuasive evidence for the survival of consciousness after bodily death. And that's why these people are afraid of the death. Of course, it's normal to have afraid of the death due to the conservation instincts. It's natural, but our minds understand a little bit more. And then nature medicine. I'm struggling to try to get a paper in Nature Medicine with molecular networks, but people who are studying spirituality are having opportunity for this. So that's now for us saying scientists to understand that generosity, happiness, spiritualities are hot topics also in science, and we have to move forward to study these aspects. Nowadays, we are seeing throughout the world wars in different places of the world. And this field here brings us the hope that makes no sense to kill each other, but generosity and love makes a lot of sense and give a lot of happiness and excitement to keep alive. And these are my team. They are there again. I say thank you to them. So if the people in the end shake the hands, go to them. And they are here. This is my wife also. She's also a postdoc, trying to find her professor position. This is good food we do sometimes in the lab to get the science more excited as we are having here. And here, a network also to acknowledge all the friends, all the research partners who are helping us to develop these research works here. And thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for a mind-blowing talk. And now, if we have a couple of quick questions, and then we will quickly move on.
Thank you very much. I was totally blown away by all the mind-body connections that you're getting down to the molecular level. I do have a worry about the NDE research.
Okay.
You know how Everton talked about mediumship as a catch-all category that has a whole lot of features that we have to distinguish? I'm really worried that NDE and the research on NDE is treating it like, well, that it is another catch-all category and that we're not being nearly specific enough. I know from some of the ethnographic research that some people who claim to have NDEs are talking very metaphorically about death. And we're nowhere near death in a sort of medical sense.
That's a great point. I'm a beginner in the field. Everton and Alexander are here to help me to answer. But, you know, I enjoyed the opportunity to tell a little experience I had. I arrived from a travel. I traveled the whole night, and I lay down to sleep, and then I was out of my body. Nobody, when I started to study this, nobody can tell me that this is not true, because I saw everything happening. As I'm conscious here, I saw my body, I saw the room, I saw my father, who is in coma now, came to my home, and this was for me an undoubted experiences that everything we are starting to study here was really true. Because I actually, I was reading some spiritism books, and then I said, I had even the conscience, I said, oh my God, everything I'm reading now is really true. But I wanted to come back. I said, but okay, I have kids. I have to go back to my body. And then I saw everything, and I went back. I woke up, and I remember everything as I remember here about this meeting. I don't know, this is just an anecdotal example, but
No,
for
no,
me it's...
but it's very relevant, because were you near death?
I think so, because I was so tired.
Because you were so tired?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't sleep the whole night traveling.
Well,
I was almost die of tiredness.
okay, that sounds kind of metaphoric to me.
Yes.
And so I think that a more narrow research agenda would be to look at the out-of-body experiences independent of whether or not they're, in other words,
Yes.
experiences of being out of your body. You could just look at them without
Yeah.
calling them near death.
Yes, that's great. That's great. Great point. Thank you so much. I think we should be aware that when we are here in this three-dimensional plane, we are living here all these connections, but during sleeping, during tiredness, or during several moments, when we reach some people, we feel very comfortable. When we meet somebody, we feel, oh, I feel not well with this person. We are having hidden connections, minding connections, connect us to other people. That's a great point. Thanks so much.
Otávio,
Oh, please.
you talked a little about the phylogenetic origins of thanatosis,
Yes.
which can be explained in evolutionary ways, in evolutionary advantages. So I was thinking if there is any kind of phylogenetic purpose or evolutionary advantage of this side of near-death experiences in which you maintain a certain type of consciousness. Your body doesn't only shut down in a protective way,
Yeah.
but you're also still conscious, and not only conscious, but your conscious is kind of it's projected outside, to the outside. And sometimes you can see your own body or listen to people around. You are still somehow conscious of your environment. I was thinking does this have any evolutionary basis, maybe advantage? And also you talked a little about the pro-social outcomes after having this kind of weird type of consciousness when experiencing near death. And does this also have evolutionary, some kind of advantage?
Great question. What's your name?
Pedro.
Great, Pedro. So I think so, Pedro. There are several points I think they are important. Just to mention one. I remember when I had a daughter, she was born with a cardiac problem. And I was working so hard in the lab. I was finishing my postdoc, and I was not even sometimes sleeping, doing research night by night. And then she due to the problem, she died after some months when she born. And then I had some, again, out-of-body experiences. And then I started to rethink about my life. So I was not realizing that my kids, my family was so important, even the most important of my life. Okay, I have to work, of course, to develop myself, to sustain, to give a good opportunity to my kids. But the out-of-body experience I shown in the Lancet make us to rethink about life. Sometimes I remember when I was a teenager, my dream was to have a Palio weekend. You know this car? You know? It was my dream. Nobody, maybe you don't know. It is an old car. So, and then I said, and then after some years, after losing a daughter, after reaching 40 years, and then after having some out-of-body experience, I said, what is a car? It is so relevant as to stay with your kids, with your family, to take care of yourself, to take care of your mind, to have friends. Now, Harvard had a strong, a very wonderful study, the longest study on happiness. And they understand, they saw to be rich was not exact. It helps, of course. We see how George smiles so often. It's important to be rich. Of course, you help people. You build the society, you make a wonderful, you can do so nice things. But there are other aspects of life which make us important. I'm sure these moves, they reach people to say, okay, how I use my money, how I deal with my friends. And this study showed that the strongest impact in our happiness is how we have social good relationships with people, how we are cooperative, how we help each other. We always say in our lab, sometimes the student, professor, please stop to make collaborations. We are now with 10 projects in collaboration. Please, we have to work to collaborate because soon we die. We have to be credited that near-death experience, a real death experience. And we need the credits that when we go out, we have a good life, also not here only. And then I think the most important aspect of these near-death experiences is to bring us to rethink our life. And then I hope that we don't need to have this experience, but we can change this just knowing that the life is much more than just material life.